Alright all, like the title suggests, in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to install a 280mm all-in-one or liquid cooler and the Fractal Design Focus G case. Let me roll that intro and we'll get into how to get this done. Alright guys, and to get this Fractal Design Celsius Plus S28 Prisma put into the Focus G case here, some of the tools that you may need: you'll need a set of wire cutters. That way you can cut zip ties on that you use for your cable management. You'll also need a number 2 Phillips head screwdriver, which I'm also going to cheat a little bit on this just to make it a little bit easier on me. I have a power option number 2 Phillips screwdriver. Don't know if I exactly need this one or not, but I also have a 6-inch extension bit. I usually use these a lot for regular screw down AIOs or regular heat sinks that get screwed down. I don't know if I'll need it with this or not, but I got it just in case I need it. And of course, I got a utility knife here. You know, just a regular utility knife from your local store. That's just for cutting boxes or removing any tape that needs removing. So to get started with this, and this case only supports a 280mm radiator in the front, so I'm going to have to put mine in the front. I could have went with a 140 and went with the top or the front. With the 280, the only option I have is in the front. So we're going to get into this thing and we're going to see what we need to do to get this 280mm AIO put into this case. Start out, we're going to remove the back screws here off the side panels, just like you did when you first built the system. Pull it back a little bit. These are captive stone screws, which makes it nice. Pull back a little bit and the side panel will come off for you. Set that down someplace. Make sure you don't drop it or kick it or anything like that. You're going to have to take off the back panel before you can get that cable, before you can run the cables in this thing. There we go. And this being a 280mm, like I said, this case only supports it in the front, so we'll have to take the front panel off as well. Reach down here and pull it off. I'm gonna set that down over the side panel, make sure we don't break it or nothing. And this case does come with 2 120mm fans in the front, so we're gonna have to remove those. The first step to doing that is, if you don't know where they're plugged in at, you'll have to trace your wires back, but you need to unplug the two front fans. And this will vary depending on your motherboard and how many fan headers you have and how you actually ran your cables for your fans when you built your system. And of course, if you're putting it in a new build in this case, you won't have to worry about disconnecting these. Okay, there we got the fan cables disconnected. Alright, where's my screwdriver? I'm going to take these here fans off. And to take these fans off, guys, you just take out the 4 screws in the corners. Just like so. And if you want to see an unboxing and overview of this cooler, I've got one on the channel. I'll put the link in the top right corner for you. Get this thing out of the box here. Okay, now my big question is, how's this radiator going to fit in here? Because it looks like it's going to be a little too big. Is it going to fit in here natively, or am I going to have to remove some stuff? Alright guys, I don't know how well I'm going to get you guys to see this, but I'm going to go ahead and take off this Hyper T4 cooler I've got on it. That way maybe it'll clear up some room for me to fit that in, which this needs to be taken off anyways. Alright guys, I had to lay it down to get that top clip off, but once you get that top clip off of it, and this is going to vary depending on the air cooler you got on your system. If you don't have one at all, then that makes it even easier. You don't have to worry about removing one of them. Make sure you unplug your CPU fan, and of course you got to take off that old thermal paste that you was using for the air cooler. So I just got me a alcohol pad that came from the hospital. I still have some of these left. Just to remove that alcohol. If you don't have alcohol pads, you know, the best thing to use would be a, paper towel, or You know, you need alcohol. You know, the higher proof of alcohol to remove thermal paste, the better it is. The easier it is on you. There we go. We got all the old thermal paste off, I believe. All right, now since we got that done, now we can see how we can fit this radiator in here. Of course, the tube's going to have to go to the top. I'm hoping I don't have to take out any of the drive cages or anything. Yeah, it looks like it'll fit down in there, just like so. Spin it around here. The hole should line up. I mean, they're both made by Fractal Design, right? So the hole should line up on it. Let's see here. Where's them holes lining up at? I'm probably I'm gonna have to take out that top drive cage. Alright guys, it's been about 45 minutes and I'm going to show you why. I hope Fractal Design watches this video. Okay guys, I don't know if you can see this very well on camera or not, but right here and right here, I literally had to cut the case. Then I had to take and bend the metal down on the 5 1/4 inch bay drive to be able to get the 280 millimeter radiator to fit in the case. It don't look very pretty, which ain't that big of a deal because it'll never be seen. You know, if I wasn't putting it out here on the video, you know, you guys wouldn't ever know it. Right up here in the corner, you can see the whiteness of it. And right down in here, you can see where I've had to cut it out and bend these metal flaps back to be able to install the 280 millimeter fan. And I know what you're thinking, just remove the 5 1/4 inch bays in it, which is possible. But you can see right here, what's holding that 5 1/4 inch bay in is pop rivets, not screws. So you'd have to literally take a drill and drill them out to remove this cage, where you wouldn't have to bend that cage. And me, I have my cord reader up here in the front for my SD card for my camera, so I don't have much of an option. So I had to take 45 minutes to an hour to bend that metal up to be able to fit this 280 millimeter radiator in here. And I think that's something Fractal needs to work on. If Fractal is going to represent that this case will handle a 280 millimeter, it should either be in the notes someplace that you have to modify the case or you have to remove something to be able to do so, or it should fit it natively with no issues. And apparently this case it don't do it natively. You have to actually modify the case to do so. And as you can tell on my radiator as well, which it ain't no big deal, I had to scrape up the corners trying to get that thing cut out and trying to get it lined up. And I've also bent a few of my fins, which, like I said, that ain't enough damage to the radiator to make a difference in it. But you know, it's just an unnecessary thing. And I know it's a $50 case, and yes, it's a $180 all-in-one water cooler, which most people don't do. But for first-time builders, you know, they say, hey, it handles a 280 millimeter radiator in front. I want a 280 millimeter all-in-one. Then they get the case, they start building it, they got to do something like this. It's going to be very unhappy. You know, it may turn them away from building computers altogether. So I think Fractal needs to fix this. You can even see up there on the top where I've scraped it up some. I'm even bleeding from it, trying to get this radiator to fit, which you should not have a problem. This is 2020 Fractal. What are you doing? This ought to be a plug and play situation, but it ain't. You gotta make it harder than what it is. But anyways, now since that rant's over with, I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna slide the radiator down in here. And this is another situation with this case. Like I said, I know it's a $50 case, but if it's gonna support it, it should do it easier than this. I'm gonna finagle it around in there some to get it to go in there. And talking about messing up the fins on it, I even smashed some back here on the back side of it, trying to get it finagled in and out of this case. So I would not recommend putting a 280 millimeter cooler in this case. I would highly suggest not to do that. But, you know, it's your option, and if you want to take the damage of messing up your equipment and having to bleed for it and having to cut your case open and everything else, I do not recommend you putting this kind of cooler in this case. But I'm gonna, now since I got my cutting done and everything else and I'm this far into it, I might as well finish it, right? I got it to finally fit. So we're gonna put this down in there. Slide down in there like so. Put that up top. Gonna spin it around here, and I'm still gonna have to do some finagling with this to get these screw holes to line up right, even though I did cut on the case already. Getting a bag of goodies here. And now, because we are now since we are on the front, I'm gonna have to put the fans on the outside here in this dent, and the radiator is going to be inside the case. And these are going to be as a intake, so they're going to go in here like this. I need to screw down through the fans. Once I run the wires through there, I have to screw down through the fans, through the case, and into the radiator. There'll be 4 screws on each fan to do so. So let me get that done here. I'll give you a time lapse of me putting these things together. And of course, guys, before putting your fans on, you have to run your cables to there is a wire grommet or a wire hole right here for you to run your cables through. You have to run all 4 cables through because each fan has 2 cables apiece. And me personally, just to keep the cables as best as I can, I'm going to try to keep both of them. Rotate the fans to where they're close to that to that hole. So that one will set something like that, and this one will set something like this as well. That way all your cables is going through them holes. Make it look all nice and pretty in the front, and don't interfere with your RGB. Now I'll give you the time lapse of me trying to screw this thing together, see if I can get these holes to line up right. And when you install the fans, guys, you want to make sure the brackets, because they are intake fans, these brackets need to be back facing towards the radiator. That's one thing to keep in mind, because they are intake. They'll be pulling air in through the front of the case and then through the system. So you want to make sure you get the fans in the right direction. And these fans, they are a little bit better fans, so they do have arrows that shows you which way the air goes and which way the blades rotate. Alright guys, Now since I showed you me putting the fans in, yes I did time lapse on that because it's pretty repetitive just putting the 4 screws in each fan. There's 8 screws. Like I said, you know, you need to make sure that you have them put it as an intake if you're going in front of the case like this, which if you're using this case, which I do not recommend using this case for 280 millimeter, but if you're going to do it, you need to make sure there is an intake instead of an exhaust. So you have to make sure which way the fan blades is heading and which way they're turning. Now you got all these cables over here. Now I got a choice. I can either take these cables. These are pretty good fans, so they can be daisy chained together for the RGBs. And the all-in-one liquid cooler on top. You've seen the unboxing overview of it right up here. So I don't think you can see that right now because it is installed. There is a header up there to run all your cables through the all-in-one. That way you only have the 2 cables to come off your water block and your pump combo. So we're gonna have to hook up the pump. So we gotta go back to our bag of goodies. And you gotta get the AM4 bracket. You gotta get the AM4 bracket here for the water pump. And you have to have the AM4 screw down screw for the bracket. So you gotta take this, remove the little plastic cover, turn this thing a little bit and the Intel bracket pops off. Depending on how you want to orientate this thing, it depends on how you're going to put this bracket on. Which, to have the Fractal Design logo upright, it needs to go like this. And you can tell my brackets is here and here. So, take your bracket and put it down onto the pump, how it lines up, and give it a twist. And it locks into place. And like I said, to have that Fractal Design logo facing the right way, it needs to be installed this way. Actually that bracket ain't right. We're gonna have to move it another notch. So you twist it, move it over one more notch, twist it back down. Is that right? Okay, there we go. Now that's going to be right on there because the Fractal Design logo is going to be facing the right way. Okay guys, and with AM4 you also need one of the thumb screws that you would normally need for the Intel install kit. You need one of the thumbnails out of, the thumb screws out of it. This AMD screw, this here screws over top of this once you put it on, and it tightens down. And that's what's going to give you the tension and give you the force to hold your CPU cooler in place. So while it's out here in the open, we're going to get this screw pushed up through the hole here. And we're just going to get this started for now because I don't know how much tension we're going to need on this thing. Okay, we got it started. Now it looks pretty well just like a regular AM4 mount with the 2 brackets that's holding onto the plastic. Let me get you zoomed in here, see if you can see if I can get you a good shot of what I'm doing here. Okay. Now since you got your bracket all put together, run your tubes the way you want to do it. Take this top little hole up here on top of the bracket, slide down over top of this one, just like so. Now just kind of hanging there. Then you need to take the bottom one here, get it lined up with the bracket, with the plastic bracket. Alright guys, now since it's hanging there, you take that little add-on that you put onto the bracket, and you slide down underneath that other piece, which I may have that screw too tight for this. Well, we'll do it this way. We'll get this put on the plastic bracket down here. This is AM4 mounting screw that came in the pack. You connect it to the plastic bracket underneath. Hold it in place. Push your bracket down over top of it for your pump here. Well, maybe you will. There we go. Now you gotta hold it in place somehow and get your screw started on it. Alright guys, I had to lay it down to get that actually started. Then you just screw it down. You don't need this extremely tight, I don't believe. I think it bottoms out where it needs to be. Alright, then we'll take a screwdriver and put an extra little torque on here just to be sure it's nice and snug. There we go. And I ain't too sure on how I want to run them tubes yet. If I want to leave them down like that, which is going to be in the way of the graphics card, or how I'm going to do that yet. But the next thing is ARGB cable for the pump, and it is keyed, so it only goes in one way. Alright, and there's your cable, and right there's your connection for it. That's for your ARGB, which everybody has to have ARGB. It only goes in one way. Just slide it up in there. There you go, just like so. Now this port may vary, guys. Okay guys, to hook up your pump header here, is just your regular 4-pin PMW fan header connection. We're going to go ahead and plug that into the CPU fan header up here top. It's keyed, so it only goes in one way. Pretty hard to mix it up. It just slides on. As far as your ARGB wire goes, I'm going to try to run it up here behind some of this other stuff here to try to hide it the best that I can. And we're going to run it out the top hole here. Alright all, now since we got that put in, we got the radiator in behind the inside the case. We got the 2 fans here in the front. We got the cables running out the side, which is behind the beam, so it's going to be in the back panel. So we can go ahead and put the front panel with the case back on here. And it just clips back on just like so. And so far this is what the front of the machine looks like. As you can tell, I went ahead and added my 3 120mm exhaust fans. Made sure them was exhausting out. I'm still not too sure on what I'm going to do with them hoses, but we'll figure out something with them, even if they are wrong. Right? All right. Now we're going to flip it around here. All right. I guess here's going to be the big explanation of it. And your system may be different than this. If your motherboard has an ARGB header on it, which mine does not, you can simply buy you an ARGB splitter and split them off. Or if you're using the header that's built onto the radiator, you only have one ARGB header to plug in, and if your motherboard's got an ARGB header, just plug it into your motherboard and you're done. My situation is a little different. I am rocking the Asus Prime X470 Pro. It's got RGB, but it don't have an ARGB header on it. So to render this thing cost about $30. I'll put a link in the description to it. It's by Deepcool. And it's a little converter box that goes from RGB to ARGB. ARGB and RGB is not backwards compatible like your chassis fans. You know, if you have a 3-pin chassis fan, you plug it into a 4-pin fan and you'll be all right, you know, into the header on your motherboard. ARGB and RGB ain't like that. So I had to spend $30 on this little box here. It's a little converter box. It goes from ARGB, or it goes from RGB to ARGB. And it's a little bit different. Here's a diagram of it. There's a little diagram of it, of how you gotta hook it up. If you're using Asus or MSI 5V, which is a 3-pin, you gotta use this top one. Gigabytes, you have to use this one down here. Here's your fan and LED strip plug-in. Over here is Asus, MSI, or Gigabyte, and that's 12 volts, so them both 4-pin connectors. And down here is the splitter cable that they furnish you with. It has to be hooked up to SATA, and this is your RGB that has to be hooked into your motherboard, which is a 4-pin header, like they show down here. So, we got to figure out how to hook this up. Now, since I'm running an Asus motherboard, I'm going to have to run this cable here that runs off of SATA and runs off the 12-volt rail. And by looking at this diagram, I need to hook up this one up here, because I got the Asus. And I got ARGB, so it's a 3-pin, 5-volt So I gotta run this one. If I was just gonna run regular RGB, I could run this one. But I don't have that. All right, guys, it is keyed. It only goes in one way. Just slide it in there like so. And these two cables come off. This is for your SATA. Hooks up your SATA just like your hard drive or your SSD does. And this is my 4-pin RGB, which I'm gonna have to run it out to my motherboard. Okay, there it is. There's my cable. And these things are keyed, or they ain't keyed, but there's a certain way you have to hook them up. You have to hook up when you're dealing with RGB. You have a 12-volt line right here. You gotta make sure that matches the 12-volt on your motherboard. And it looks like the 12-volt well on my RGB header there is to the left. So we're gonna make sure we have the 12-volt that's labeled on the header here to the left, and we're gonna plug it in. All right, guys, I had to lay it down there to get it plugged in, but there it is. It's plugged in there. The RGBs on them are connectable. You can actually link them together and only have one port. If you've seen the unboxing of this, I've showed you the control box or the RGB and the hub connector on the end of the radiator that you can plug all this into. So we're going to take advantage of that in this build. You're going to pull one of these little caps off. I'll hook up the ARGB here. Going to daisy chain them together. Now the RGB on both fans will run off this one RGB connector. The fans you can't do that with. You have two different fan connectors here. So we're going to have to hook them up individually. I should have shot this before I put the radiator in the system. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this. We're going to run these back in here in the front. It's going to be kind of hard to get you guys a view of it. On the top of the radiator is the control for the RGBs and the fan connectors. So I'm going to go ahead and get them hooked up for you. Alright guys, now since we got them there cables hooked up there, pull all the excess back through here. And now we get to do cable management with them. Which, if this was all the cables that was added, it wouldn't be too bad. But as you can tell, like I said before, I got a bunch of other RGB leads. I got a bunch of other fan leads I need to take care of. And like I said before, I had to get this converter box because mine's got an RGB, not ARGB header on it. And now the ARGB and the fans, since I got them plugged up into that splitter box, that control box, or the hub, whatever you want to call it there on the radiator, that will be controlled through this one cable that comes off of the water block, and the fan speeds will be controlled by the CPU header, just like the pump will, which that's ideal when you're using an all-in-one water block. Normally you would just take your ARGB cable from your water block and plug it into your motherboard. I can't do that. So I had to go through the extra expense and the BS of getting this here converter box. We're going to put a male-to-male connector into the splitter cable, and then we're going to plug in the ARGB. And there you go. And like I showed you when I did the water block install, you plug that into your CPU header. And now since you use the fan hub and the ARGB hub on the radiator, your fans will be controlled, ARGB and the speed will be controlled by the CPU fan header and this one ARGB header. Let me get the rest of this cable management done up here and get the rest of everything else hooked up, and I'll give you some B-roll of what the system looks like with all the ARGB and all the fans going. I'll be right back. off, and that's the way I had to do it to get that 280mm radiator in the front of my Fractal Design Focus G case. There's a few things I need to mention. In the video you see me plug in the pump into the CPU fan. Why I did that was because a lot of motherboards don't have an AIO pump, or they don't have a regular pump header. And if you don't have either one of them on your motherboard, you need to plug it into that CPU fan. Also, on top of that, if you do have an AIO pump header, or if you have a pump header and you plug them into it instead of that CPU fan, when you first boot your computer up, you'll have to go into your BIOS and you'll have to disable your CPU fan. Depending on your motherboard, it depends on how you do this. Mostly, it's under this monitoring section. You find your CPU, you have to disable it or ignore this to be able to get your computer to boot up into Windows. Which ain't that big of a deal. You know, you may have to search around your BIOS a little bit to figure out how to get that resolved. Or you could plug in a PMW chassis fan into that header if you'd like to. That's a simple way to get around that. As long as there's a PMW fan, you know, it'll recognize that there's something plugged into that header. If it's a DC fan, it won't recognize that there's anything plugged in that header either. So you still have to go into your BIOS and disable your monitoring for your CPU fan. That's just something to note. You know, depending on how your motherboard's set up and how you set up your system and you hook up your pump, you know, that is something you may have to take into consideration. If you like this video, you like this kind of content, make sure you go down and give me a like. Give me a dislike if you didn't. There's that comment section. I go through them every weekend, Saturday morning, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time here in the U.S. I read down through all the comments and just kind of hang out with me, and we talk tech usually. Don't forget that lonely little subscribe button. Turn on that notification bell where you're notified next time I put out a video or I go live. And also, if you're on Twitter or Instagram, I'm also one of them. I won't kill your inbox. I do put up photos of new stuff that I have coming in. And that's also a way for me to tell you when my live show's going on, or if it has to be canceled for some reason, which does happen from time to time. Not often, but time to time it's got to be canceled. And that's the way you'll get the cancellation notice if I ain't going to be able to do the live stream that weekend. But with all that being said, you all have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video or live stream.